And welcome back to Weekend Watches. I've got my sunny shirt on, and as you watch this, I'm probably out on the bike. So let's get right to it. Quick wrist check for those who are new to the show, and this is a new program on our channel, only our third episode. We're off to a flying start, and so is my Zin Easy M11, a 500-piece 43mm tegmented steel limited edition from 2017. It has a redesigned and re-engineered Valjoux 7750 that works like an old Lemania 5100. All of this in tribute to the 1997 Zin Easy M1 created for the German Federal Customs Service Enforcement Unit. A lovely lefty chrono, swimmable, perfect with bidirectional rotating bezel. I adore this piece. Alright, let's jump straight into the clickbait. I promised you a Rolex black and blue GMT, and I am going to deliver. The new hotness, only months off the press. This is the 126710 BLNR, still 40mm, still black and blue, Cerachrom bezel in blue and black ceramic, bidirectional rotating as ever, so you can temporarily read 3 time zones on this dial. You still have that lovely lacquered blue hand for the 24-hour, and of course large white gold indices and hands for the remainder. Now what's new this year is a new movement. Inside there is the caliber 3285 3-day power reserve dual time, and then externally we now have the Jubilee bracelet on the black and blue. The old Oyster black and blue has been discontinued. So how does it wear? I have to say this is the one I would prefer. Between the two, some folks have joked that on the Jubilee this is the Bat Girl instead of the Batman. Frankly, I'm not one for nicknames. This is just more comfortable, and the original Jubilee bracelet was an option for the first half century of the GMT, right up until the arrival of the Supercase watch in 2005 and the phase out of the previous steel model in 2007. This Jubilee bracelet was available and always an option because the GMT was one of the premium offerings in the Rolex catalog. An aviator, after all, has no need for an Oyster bracelet in the cockpit, and thus the Jubilee is both comfortable and true to history. The watch still 40mm in diameter and about 12.5mm thick. It's an easy one to wear on a smaller wrist, and the Jubilee makes it easier, in fact, to wear than the old Oyster. Again, a 3-day power reserve chronergy escapement movement inside, so mechanically there have been upgrades. That said, it is not my favorite Rolex on the table tonight. In order, let me take you through my favorites. I have to tell you that I love a salmon dial on a Rolex, and I love a 36mm case. And this is an interesting combination of a salmon metallic dial with beautifully set gems on white gold indices and an uncommon coupling of an Oyster bracelet in white gold with a Rolex day-date, often known as the President, largely because it's equipped with the President bracelet. In almost every instance, we see the President bracelet with its narrow 3-link design on a day-date. Instead here, we have something that's a little bit more robust on the wrist, and note, still with the crown clasp. This is not an Oyster clasp here. It maintains its low profile as you would find on the President bracelet. This is a tasteful and discreet use of gems on a men's watch, and in combination with the cool white tones of the bezel, the case, and of course the bracelet, I actually find that the diamonds work well here. They offer high contrast on the dial, a little bit of upscale sparkle, and they're a perfect match for the salmon metallic, almost copper pink of this dial. Don't let anyone tell you this is a champagne dial. This looks nothing like champagne. This has dark red overtones and undertones. At the same time, they jump in and out of the dial as you move it through the light. Sometimes it looks almost silver, sometimes it looks almost red, and then there's an entire spectrum in between, and a perfect size with the ultimate everyday friendly complication. So that's 36mm. Now I'm going to take you into my second favorite Rolex on the table tonight, which is the Rolex Explorer 2. Launched as you see it in 2011, the 42mm case was a little bit of a controversy. Rolex collectors were taken aback, having gotten used to the 40mm case since 1971. The 42 was a strident statement, and some folks said it felt like a product of the prior decade, the 2000s, rather than a product for the 2010s. But this has stood the test of time. First, because it's gloriously flat. As you can see, about 12.5mm thick and 42 across. It looks thinner than other Rolex watches on the wrist because of the aspect ratio. There is a lovely extended bezel. Now you can more easily see the satin grain laid down with a lapping machine radially on the bezel because the bezel is just objectively bigger. I love that 70s inflected radial grain. And then the dial is something else. As you can see, blackened hands, blackened indices, and a gloss white base in lacquer. This is not a silver, matte, or sunburst. This is true bleached white, and it's glorious with its orange shock, Explorer 2, the orange arrow index, a nod to the so-called Steve McQueen era. Sure, he never wore the Explorer 2, but I don't want to get in the way of a good fable. Throwing the watch on the wrist, I'm going to show you how it wears, and I like the way it wears, even on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist, because of the flatness and the elegance that comes with the broad, thin case. Now here it's a full-sizer, make no mistake, but I can easily wear it on 16 centimeters, and I think you can go down to 14.5 centimeters and wear this one easily. So the timepiece, of course, featuring the 3187 movement, only ever used in this reference. It is basically a 3186, but with a larger date wheel and Rolex's proprietary Paraflex shock protection system. So this watch is all Rolex and a very distinct look. Without the mobile bezel, it has more of a formal aesthetic with all the functionality of the 2 time zones. And of course, being a true Rolex sports watch, it has the double locking clasp. It has the first with the beak and the hook system internally, and you can see the beak and you can see the hook. It snaps shut, and then with the clamshell, this one's sure tight. And of course, being a premium Rolex, the clasp is finished internally, and you get the Easy Link quick adjust system built in. You can just see the carve out of the Easy Link. That allows you to take in or out 5 millimeters without a tool. So this is a wonderful watch, but it is not my favorite Rolex on the table tonight. That honor goes to the Maltese Falcon, the second of our Day-Dates. This one, a true Day-Date 2, a model made from 2008 through 2014. Here we have one of the rarest versions of that model. Note the exquisite blackened features of the dial. Look at the concentric race underneath the hour track with the blackened white gold indices in Arabic form, and look at the contrast between the white on black print, the calendar discs, and the dial base, which I should mention is matte to further absorb light. You turn this watch at the right angle and it becomes a veritable stealth bomber. Of course, the Maltese Falcon appellation appropriate here. This thing is black, stark, and engrossing. It captivates the imagination even as it tantalizes the senses. This is a watch that feels like it weighs half a pound in the hand. And I should mention, here with the President bracelet, you are getting the ceramic coated pins that debuted on the platinum version of the Day-Date 2. Now, in the current Day-Date 40, every bracelet has the ceramic coated pins, but back in the Day-Date 2 era, it was only the platinum bracelet. The result being that the ceramic coat prevents the pins from wearing down inside the bracelet. As a result, the so-called Rolex bracelet stretch has been eliminated and killed dead because the the platinum cannot aggress against the pins and wear them down. So you get an upgraded bracelet, you get a shockingly attractive watch that, with its solid end links, spans 53 millimeters across the wrist. It is incredibly imposing. With that broad conical bezel, it doesn't have a little bit more wrist presence than the Day-Date 40. It has a lot more. This is a shockingly stark and adventurous look for Rolex, and I have to admit, the first time I saw one of these, I wondered if it was aftermarket. It is that bold. And I use that term bold in the most affectionate and loving sense. This is a great effort. Okay, let's jump from full bracelet Rolex to something on a strap. Let's jump from megabuck watches to value watches. This is the Nomos Tangant Date Power Reserve. 35 millimeters in stainless steel with a lovely orbital power reserve. You can see as I wind it, not the easiest thing in the world to wind a watch backwards. Not only does the power reserve orbit around, but there's also a change in color within the cutout of the power reserve. It's a remarkably dynamic take on an ordinarily static complication. Now you have lovely radially arrayed indices and Arabic numerals, you have blued hands, needle fashion, a minimalist silver matte dial, and then you turn it all over and you have a manufacturer movement. This is the DUW 4401. Deutsche Ehrenwerke. This is not just a manufacturer movement. This is Nomos' own movement as well as escapement. The anchor, the escape wheel, the hairspring, and the balance are all Nomos. This is the swing system, and if you could get close and see, you would see a blued hairspring. That's your signature of the swing system. Glasuta stripes, 3/4 style bridge, a nod to the pocket watch era, 42-hour manual wind power reserve, and as you can see, there is a triple spiral on the ratchet wheel with a lovely pocket watch inspired multi-piece click. And I'll wind the watch so you can see that click in action. but it's drawn along and out of position as you wind the watch. This is a glorious nod to Saxony's watchmaking past, even as it firmly embraces the future and does so with exquisite taste. 35 millimeters is hardly in step with modern tastes. This is more of a 50s or 60s halcyon era dress watch, proportioning and dimensioning. And you can see that the lugs give the watch its span, not the case, but the lugs. If you're a true traditionalist and you ache for the dress watches of Vacheron, Patek, and Audemars Piguet from the 1950s and 60s, this is your timepiece. And it's universally wearable on smaller wrists. I could easily wear and enjoy this timepiece, and a complication to boot. Now jumping into our second Nomos, this is part of a collection that arrived for summer 2017, and it's just as relevant for summer 2019, but this is the Nomos Club Siren Blue, also known as Signal Blau. It is a sensational blue lacquer, and the numerals on the dial, if you take Nomos at face value, the font inspired by highway signs on U.S. interstates. Now you can see there are a few splashes of color, the orange, the cyan blue, the more exuberant signal blue, and then of course you have the polished hands at center and the white of the printing. It has a lovely domed style bezel, and if you look carefully you can see that there is no seam between bezel and case flank, so the top of the case is all of one piece, creating a handsome seamless monoblock look. The watch, 200 meters water resistant, is a true sports watch, loomed, automatic winding, and water resistant. The lugs are strong and arcing. Nomos doesn't create huge watches, but it creates arcing, expressive lugs. You saw that on the Tangant, and now you see it here on the Club. Turn it all over and you have the DUW 3001, much like the 4401, but this one with a 43-hour power reserve. It still features the swing system, but it has a full balance bridge for shock resistance, and of course automatic winding. You can see there are considerable black polished components, such as the ratchet wheel and the wheel atop the rotor at center, handsomely executed with a peripheral and base plate engine turning. There are glasuta stripes across the bridge as well as the skeletonized rotor. This is a good looking watch. Throw it on the wrist one more time. It's got a lot of personality. The color gives it an exuberant, flamboyant, even brash air. You don't need oversized watches to make a statement, and this Nomos Club proves it. All right, let's run the table with the haut de gamme, starting with Laurent Ferrier. In 2017, we saw the Montre École, a wristwatch with the shape of Laurent Ferrier's own school watch from his formative days as a watchmaker. Well, later in 2017, we saw the Montre École combined with a regulator dial. You could see the hours, minutes, and seconds split, and you'll also note that the quarters are printed in a lovely sky blue. It features a vertical satin finish and lovely white gold assegai or spear style hands. Now the regulator, when you turn it all over, by the way, the watch is a delicious 47 millimeters lug to lug and under 12 millimeters thick, 40 millimeters in diameter. You get a Laurent Ferrier caliber. This is the Laurent Ferrier 22801, 72-hour automatic winding power reserve, a jeweled staff with a ratchet pawl system for silent winding. You'll also note that there is a black polished half bridge for the balance with 4 interior angles. The balance beats away at 21.6. It's free sprung, adjusted in 6 positions, one more than a standard chronometer. It has a double direct impulse escapement modeled after Breguet's natural escapement with twin nickel phosphorus wheels, only impulsing the balance in its direction of travel in each direction, with a silicon locking mechanism that locks each one as the other creates its impulse. There's an overcoil hairspring and immaculate finish. Black polish on the screws, black polish on the bridge for the winding system, black polish on the half bridge for the balance, immaculately laid Côte de Genève, and you could see that crested gradient. True Côte de Genève laid down with an abrasive wheel will be darker on one side and lighter on the other, whereas stamped Côte de Genève will be uniform. You can see there's also a fat and mirrored anglage in every jewel and screw sink, plus the edge of every bridge. You can see the 5th interior angle at center, and then there's an engine-turned perlage on the base plate. As good as it gets. Let's throw it on the wrist, and I should mention Laurent Ferrier coats the underside of the strap with a wonderful suede leather that's a refreshing turn from the conventional calfskin, which can sometimes feel clammy on other watches on hot days. Here, Laurent Ferrier giving you the total package, and in stainless steel with a wonderful sports style strap to match. Again, that suede feeling on the underside prevents it from feeling clammy on a hot day as a conventional strap can. A wonderful watch, universally wearable. Let's take a detour to Saxony. A Lange und Söhne gets all of the credit for high-end German finish. That needs to change. There's Moritz Grossmann, there is Lang und Heine, and of course, there is the well-known Glashütte Original, who in 2002 launched their Pano series chronograph. The Pantograph, originally a smaller timepiece, was phased out by 2005 but reborn in 2012 as a 40mm watch. Now it's an inverted chronograph, which means the trigger at the top actually resets and restarts, and as you can see, it is a flyback chronograph. There are 3 scales, 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and then 20 to 30, making it easier to read the minute scale. And you'll also appreciate the fact that the watch has a wonderful distinction between the time-telling functions, the date, and the minute scale, which is frankly the most important part of a chronograph readout. You can also operate the chronograph conventionally with a start and stop function, reset and then restart, and the chronograph featuring the exquisite manufacturer caliber 6103 manual wind with a 42-hour power reserve. Let me get my fingerprints off this one because I'm not doing it any justice in that regard. The timepiece featuring everything you expect in high-end German watch finish. You could see there are Glashütte stripes across the bridges. You'll also appreciate how much of the movement is black polished, and you can really see, for example, the lever arm pivots black polished. You could see that the screws that are not blued are black polished. You could see that the swan's neck regulator is black polished, and you could see the tone of the black polished components changing as I shift it through the light. Now I'll hold it steady. You can also see the fired blue screws. You could see jewels set in screw-fixed chaton a la pocket watch design in the 19th century, and then you can see the freehand engraved half bridge for the balance, the balance beating away at 28,800 vibrations per hour, a huge philosophical difference with Lange that has its big chronograph balances beating away at 18,000. You'll also note that it features a high-grade blade spoke balance. It's adjusted in 5 positions, this 41 jewel movement with stop seconds as well. A lovely timepiece, water resistant surprisingly to 50 meters for a dress watch. You just don't expect 50-meter water resistance when 20 to 30 is the standard, but Geo going the extra mile. If you didn't like the previous Pantograph, the 40mm is going to be more your speed. A timepiece that's full-size but not oversized. You can see it wears easily on my wrist. Now, speaking of Saxon watchmaking, we do need to give Lange its fair due, because after all, Lange's datograph arguably revolutionized chronograph finish and design when it debuted in 1999, and in 2006, Lange gave us another opus, the follow-up, the datograph Perpetual, platinum, 41.5 millimeters as my calipers read it. You can see the dial is galvanized gray, but it is actually a solid disc of sterling silver. Now, the folks at Lange are smart. They realize that with a pusher adjuster on the flank of the case that steps all of the functions of the chronograph in sequence, if you were to put the watch down at night, it might accidentally jump the calendar indications. So, again, like I said, clever folks, you have to pull the crown outwards, and that enables the stepping system. And now everything advances. You could see the date, you could see the day, the month, and ultimately even the leap year cycle. A clever watch, and it retains the underlying functionality of the datograph. So you have the, let me make sure I wound this one properly. So you have the datagraph's primary function, which is a flyback chronograph, present and correct. You also have a loomed dial. Take a close look right here. This is a watch that you can read at night. The moon phase disc, because this is a Lange, is made of solid gold. So you've got a solid gold moon phase disc, a platinum watch, a solid silver dial, and caliber 9521. Beautifully executed, 45 jewels, adjusted in a chronometer style, 5 positions. This is as good as a lateral clutch chronograph gets. First, note the depth of it, which is exceptional. Second, take a look at the lateral clutch, which is fully jeweled. It moves into contact, driving, it moves away. You could see the column wheel with its crenellated towers and its cap all black polished. And again, this is a watch with black polished components. You could see them all turning black as I move the watch through the light. The balance, I mentioned, it's a big slow one, huge moment of inertia to make up for its lack of rate, but it beats away at 18,000 vibrations per hour. Black polished swan's neck fine adjustment. You could see the half bridge here, as on the Glashütte, is freehand engraved, so no two are exactly alike. Now let's reset everything, and you can watch the recentering hammers falling on the heart cam at center. Look at it at an angle and you get a better sense of the depth of this caliber. The primary component of the movement, bridges and plates, is German silver, nickel copper zinc, with the copper giving it its golden hue. All of the silvered components are made of steel, so you have a medley of gold, silver, blue, and violet. It's a work of art. You wish you could wear it upside down. But Patek Philippe did set the original standard in the complicated chronograph realm, and they did own the market until the interloper from Saxony arrived. From 1985, roughly, 1985, early 1986 to 2004, Patek Philippe's 3970 ruled the roost as the perpetual calendar chronograph of reference. It's traditionally sized at 36 millimeters, and right here you can see with baton hands and dart-style indices, this is a Series 3 watch, which represents the majority of production. Its most notable features, of course, those dial furniture elements, and of course, established on prior models, the display caseback. You have to remember that this is the CH 2770 that, as the Omega 321 went to the moon 50 years ago. It's the same basic Lemania 2310 architecture, but finished to very different spec. On the Patek Philippe, it's adjusted in 5 positions. An overcoil hairspring is combined with a free-sprung Gyromax-style balance of Patek's own design. So the regulator, the hairspring, all Patek. 5-position adjustment, and of course the execution showing you the highest standard of Geneva finish, because every single 3970 was Geneva seal. No Patek Philippe seal here. This is the nostalgic older standard. You could see the lateral clutch here moving into and out of contact, and you could see the same recentering hammers falling on the heart cam. Start it up one more time, stop it, watch that reset. This is beauty. This is a work of art. This is emotional. Yes, it's an engineered product, but both the creators and the connoisseurs of watches like this shed a tear because it just overcomes you. It's the kind of thing that is an emotional, ineffable experience. If you haven't ever sensed it, I can't relate it by word or imagery, but I know you're feeling it right now, and I'm feeling it too. At 36 millimeters, this is a universally wearable watch. It's a nice traditional size, and it's a great power watch for a smaller wrist, including for women who want a high complication and a timepiece that's not designed for the ladies, but for anyone who has that connoisseurship, knowledge, and respect for a timepiece like this. Now, in terms of production, the 3970 was far more common than the previous perpetual calendar chronos, all of which were built in the hundreds. But somewhere between, I'd say about 2,800 and about 3,500 of these were made between 85 and 2004. So they're never going to be common watches. Let's jump to something of a very different persuasion. A 43 millimeter watch from a company that was famous for making oversized timepieces before that was even a thing. The original oversized wristwatch, not a converted pocket watch, but born as a wristwatch, was the 1939 IWC Reference 325, better known as the Portugueser. And right here you have the 2005 F.A. Jones Tribute model, 43 millimeters in a lovely, richly toned pink gold. You can see the watch wears easily on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist with a white lacquer dial. The timepiece is basically a hybrid of an F.A. Jones 19th century IWC pocket watch about its dial and an IWC Portuguese about its case design. You'll even note that a little bit of a pocket watch has seeped into the onion-style crown design with lovely Breguet-style hands, and the font used for the numerals on the lacquer dial is very much of the 19th century. You can even see the signature of the American founder of IWC, F.A. Jones, reproduced at 12 o'clock on the dial. It is a lovely Portugueser pocket watch hybrid, and that continues on the reverse side. Caliber 98290, 18 jewels, adjusted 5 positions chronometer style, a huge balance that is almost the radius of the movement. Beaten away at 18,000, it has an overcoil hairspring, and you can see the giant hacking lever adjacent to the balance. Watch it move as I pull the crown. You can actually see that giant hacking lever. It's going to jump away now. That is the most obvious hacking lever I've ever seen on a watch. The remainder is dedicated, again, to the memory of IWC's pocket watch era. You have the crown wheel. You have a pocket watch style click and click spring. You can see how that click is a little bit more dynamic than a typical click in that it is a multi-part, almost swan's neck extension. You have the ratchet wheel over the barrel. Then you have the center wheel, a true center wheel layout like a pocket watch. Third wheel, fourth wheel, escape wheel, and that giant balance. There's a damascening across the bridges, and then there's an engine turning across the base plate with a comically extended and historically true Jones Arrow Index. This was the fine adjustment system originally invented by Jones, an American watchmaker from Boston, and in its day, it was the standard in precise regulation. The timepiece wears, again, like a pocket watch, but on your wrist. A wonderful confluence of IWC's 19th century, 20th century, and 21st century heritage. And unlike conventional IWC limited editions, which are one out of however many, this one is individually numbered, and this series very special for that. Ulysse Nardin, one of my favorite brands. A very polarizing company because it designs take-it-or-leave-it watches, and I see that as a mark of integrity, but they are unabashed innovators. They have absolutely no reservations about pushing the limit. For example, a perpetual calendar dive watch. Is it absurd? Back in 2003, Ulysse Nardin made 500 of these aqua perpetuals, and as you can see, with a lovely Flinke-style lacquer dial featuring guilloche and then lacquer translucent on top. The same treatment is rendered on the unidirectional rotating dive bezel. The watch 42.7 millimeters in diameter and only 46 millimeters lug to lug. This 500-piece limited edition wears easily on a small wrist, but the highlight is the perpetual calendar itself, which is not just audacious, as this chronometer caliber sits in a dive watch with a perpetual calendar, but you can set the calendar forward or backwards. Note that I'm able to set it in either direction, that it's August and then it's July again. This bidirectional system, designed by one-time Vatican clock restorer and latterly Ulysse Nardin concept guy Ludwig Oxlin, is the most user-friendly perpetual calendar system in the industry. Throw this one on, and by the way, let me clarify that even back in 2003, Ulysse Nardin understood that people wanted to be able to see their movement, so the Ulysse Nardin caliber 33 is visible through the caseback, and it is gorgeous with a lovely rusticated satin finish and roughed white gold winding mass with a lacquer inlay. You can also see the circular Cote de Genève engine turn perlage and blued screws. This is a timepiece that wears easily on a small wrist, and I recommend it for smaller wrists who like the big watch look. It's not oversized at 42.7, but you can see that the short lug-to-lug span, as well as the clever double articulated hinged strap bracelet hybrid, makes this a comfortable watch to wear, and I love the natural vulcanized rubber used for the strap because it has a vanilla scenting to it. It's even been scented for your olfactory pleasure. The clasp itself is made of titanium and thus hypoallergenic and very comfortable. Close it all up and I can show you how the Ulysse Nardin bracelet system works. As you'll note, it's double hinged, and that titanium link inside makes it very comfortable. So though it has a rigid conforming end link, it still pulls straight down over a small wrist. And marine chronometer style, you'll note that the case band features a bolt-fixed and blued bolt-fixed individual numbering plate. Look at the lug profiles, which are actually concave and satin finished. They really thought this one out. This is one of my favorite watches from one of my favorite brands. That said, their magnum opus in the 2000s was the Freak, and I've got the first one on the table. In fact, this is remarkably close to being the first Freak, as this is a Freak 1, number 20 in the production sequence. This is the original 2001 Freak. Let me get the light out of the way, remove some fingerprints, and show you what made the Freak so freakish and revolutionary so. Okay, first of all, if you can't wear most Freaks, this is the one for you, because the original 2001 Freak was 42 millimeters. It escalated rapidly from there, but the watch is just over 51 lug to lug, and it's 10.4 millimeters thick. So you're going to find this 42 wears fairly true to size. Now on the dial, you're looking at a carousel, a system invented in the 1890s by Bonne Bonnickson, a Dane, who sought to create the same benefits of a tourbillon, that is constant motion with respect to gravity, to even out timing errors, but he wanted something that was tougher than the original Breguet tourbillon, and what he came up with was the carousel. The carousel separates the drive for the escapement and the carriage itself. As a result, you can move the carriage without crashing the escapement, and now you can see to good advantage what made the Freak so freakish in detail. This is the dual Ulisse escapement system. This is also known as the Freak 1.5. It's a Freak 1 with the Freak 2's reprofiled silicon escape wheels. The use of a direct impulse escapement was revolutionary in 2001, but the real revolution was the debut of silicon components in a watch. And the first version, the Dual Direct, didn't work terribly well, so during service, the wheels were reprofiled and replaced. The same technology, the same historic landmark status, but better functionality. You'll also appreciate the fact that the movement is effectively a baguette-style caliber that doubles as the minute hand. So as you adjust the watch by turning the bezel, and by the way, that's the hour hand just below, you can move that baguette-style minute hand. I'll also mention that the original Freak had no locking lever, so the bezel was a bit more mobile than later on. Manual wind using the case back, there is still a 7-day power reserve for this 32 jewel caliber, and as you could see, the original dual direct text still present on the case back, though make no mistake, this is a Freak 1.5. Let's throw it on the wrist. This is a monster in white gold. First of all, being smaller and thinner than the subsequent Freaks, it's also a bit more discreet. Not discreet, but more discreet. Much more wearable, however. Supremely comfortable and very thin. No subsequent Freak would be this slender and this svelte, so this is a Freak you can wear under a cuff, and one of the most important watches of the 20th century, or I should say the 21st century. The design was 20th century, and by the way, Carol Forestier Casapi of Cartier had the original idea for the watch that became the Freak. A combination of Pierre Gigax and Ludwig Oxlin finished the job at Ulysse Norden. Credit where credit is due. What a watch. Okay, where do we go from there? How about a little bit of Audemars Piguet, and then we'll break for Omega. Of course, the first Royal Oak bowed in 1972. The first complication, the Perpetual calendar, arrived in 1981. But in 1983, we saw the watch you see here. This is reference 25594. Sometimes this is known as the owl with a moon, because if you look at it, it has the look of an owl with its giant peepers staring blindly, or I should say blankly, because they're not blind at night, into the darkness, seeking its prey. It's a 36, it's a complication, it's a JLC base caliber with an Audemars Piguet complication module, a date with a moon phase, the owl with a moon. By the way, someone placed a tag that locked that one shut. Someone's got to do better with a label maker. But it's a lovely 36. The watch is 9.4 millimeters thick on the wrist, so it's nice and slender. The 36 is universal, and I should mention this watch is all in steel with a lovely blue tapisserie dial. Handsomely balanced. You can see it has a sort of cruciform symmetry to it because of the way the registers balance each other and the AP logo and marquee balance the moon phase. But it gets better. That watch, by the way, in E-Series late 1990s. This watch, a product of the 2010s, reference 15350 ST, stainless steel, 39 millimeter, the Royal Oaks skeleton. Now, everything is laid bare here. The watch still is functional as a standard 15300, but you could see the movement has been evacuated by hand and then hand finish. This is a significantly higher grade of finish than you'll find on a standard 15300, 400, or 500. And as you can see, everything has been evacuated, including the mainspring barrel, which is an open barrel design. Turn it all over, and I certainly will, and you could see through the case back, everything else has been executed immaculately. The skeletonized work continues on the reverse side, as does the hand finishing. A watch that in 39 millimeters wears more easily than the newer double balance, so if the double balance case is just a little too large for you, let me see what I can do about the light here. It's getting locked out by the light. We'll turn it back to the dial side. But if you can't quite wear the double balance, this is the watch for you. It wears a treat, and it is stunning to see in person. In the metal, it doesn't get much better than that. That said, I have 3 Omegas, each one more sensational than the last. First, we have the Apollo 11 45th anniversary, 1,969 pieces. It's a titanium moonwatch, which means you've got the 1861 caliber inside, but you have a lovely dial in a matte finish with blackened indices as well as sub-register features. You can see there's a tachymeter scale outboard with a lovely kiss of rose gold, and then a few rose gold shocks on the dial in the form of the hands as well as the indices. A low glare look that fits a treat and wears unconventionally on this full NATO strap. You can see the watch has maybe a more technical, NASA-oriented look and feel, certainly astronaut appropriate, as this NATO is excessively long for conventional use, but it's a watch that wears feather light because of that titanium matte construction. And note that contrary to a conventional moonwatch, the lugs here feature a satin finish rather than a polished bevel. And look at the extension of that textile. This is designed to be worn over a spacesuit should you have the need. A brief detour into the world of Breguet within the Swatch Group. This is the most interesting travel time watch no one talks about. The 5717, this is the Breguet Classique Oromundi. You can see that there are black polished continents raised and relieved on a dial that is hand lacquered. There is a freehand engraved gusting cloud over a beautifully matched lacquered moon phase, and then you have a sort of geographic complication like the JLC Geographic, where you can change the city of reference down at 6 o'clock and thus change the display on the dial. But there is a hidden duality here. Note the date indicator. You can store by mechanical memory 2 different time zones and you alter between them like so. The system is able to jump between the first. Let me transition completely through the date change here. But you can see as I alternate between the 2 time zones, it jumps between the second and the first, as I can store the time in 2 different time zones and 2 different days depending on my proximity relative to the international date line. The dial itself, with the lacquer and the black polish and the freehand engraving, is made of solid gold. It's then silver galvanized and hand lacquered and black polished. Now I can also, via the control down at 8 o'clock, change my city of reference, which will modify the position of the local hour hand. And you could see, my apologies, that's not a moon phase, that is a day-night indicator. Precision is important. Turn it all over and you have the 55-hour power reserve, caliber 77F0. 55-hour power reserve, silicon hairspring, silicon escapement, all the latest tech. It beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour. It is amagnetic and it features a free-sprung architecture with a rose lathe cut rotor. So this is a true guilloche cut rotor and a timepiece that's big, make no mistake. At about 43.5 millimeters on the wrist, it fills out your wrist, but it's one of the most interesting travel time watches you will encounter, and it wears a treat. It's seriously hefty thanks to that solid gold dial. That said, I think I like this one better. Launched in late 2015 for the 2016 model year, this is the Dualmet UTT Unique Travel Time Hammered Dial. No 2 are exactly alike in this white gold 42mm series of 200 because the chiseling is done manually. You can see that chiseled texture. It's a wonderful pebbly look, and it's almost like metallic concrete on your dial. Now the watch is a dual time and an exceptional one in that you can actually set the second time zone to the minute. So there is no need, and note the jump hour system, there is no need to approximate any idiosyncratic local time zone from Venezuela to North Korea to certain weird airport localities can be portrayed on that second display. And by the way, this is the only confirmed series production Jaeger-LeCoultre jump hour wristwatch. A timepiece, well, it was back in 2016, a timepiece that literally offers everything. 2 time zones, 2 power reserves, the whole power reserve is 50 hours. You have a GMT indicator that's not actually a world time down at 6 o'clock, but you can see there's an AM PM, and the AM PM shading jumps around as you change your reference time zone. You can actually see the shaded day and night migrating around the dial. How do you know the correct GMT offset of any locality? Well, it's all engraved on the reverse side, and that's caliber 383, 498 parts. You have 2 mainspring barrels that are powering the 2 different types of display on the watch, the time and the travel time. So 2 different barrels to power the 2 different indications, meaning that there's no loss of amplitude at the free-sprung balance. And this is the only standard Dualmet that beats away at 28.8 rather than 21.6. The bridges feature Côte de Soleil, a sunburst radiating out from the balance, and you can see that it's the same material used in Olanga, that German silver. Since we are in the Vallée du Jeu, we shall call it Maillot. It is nickel copper zinc, which is why it has that golden hue, just like you'll find on Olanga. You can see that lovely tone, which is why I've often described the Dualmet as the Jaeger-LeCoultre that is built like Olanga. It even has the squat separate lugs that you'll see on Olanga case. And as you can see, this one featuring the domed bezel profile that succeeded the prior conical bezel on the Dualmet. Look at the double finish of the case with the lugs welded on and then all evidence of the joint removed to create that sharp cleft crease, and then the double finish with the satin flowing into the black polish. Absolutely gorgeous, and one of the coolest travel watches you will ever encounter. Now, what is the grand finale? Well, how about 2 in blue? Blue ceramic, that is, from Omega. This is the Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean GMT Big Blue, named after the historic Seamaster 120 chronograph, the 176004. This watch came out in 2017, and it was the most interesting new Omega of the year. It is 45.5 millimeters, but light since it's in ceramic. It features a matching lacquered blue dial, ceramic blue dial, and you can see there is the zirconium oxide formula right under the hands at center. So you have that lacquer or enamel-like gloss ceramic, and then you have white gold hands and indices with a lovely and audacious tritone of white, orange, and blue. Of course, the movement is a coaxial, and it is a chronometer, and Omega specs a strap to match. This is a sensational watch. Let me turn it all over so you can see the balance. This is a sensational watch technically and aesthetically, and very accurate. 600 meters water resistant, and of course, this is a timepiece that is designed to be a true diver, as rather than a GMT bezel, you have a true unidirectional rotating dive bezel. It is a ceramic bezel with a ceramic insert, and 15 minutes, the first calibrated 15 minutes with a rubber insert to create that contrast. Throw it on the wrist. The watch has a combination ceramized and titanium clasp, so the outer clasp is ceramic to prevent it from scratching, just like the rest of the watch. It's a bomber. It's breathtaking. It's lighter than you would expect on the wrist, but it's not the most interesting blue ceramic Omega on the table. That honor goes to the shockingly beautiful 2018 Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch Blue Side of the Moon Aventurine. Do I have your attention? The Aventurine quartz crystal, remanufactured, polished to a gloss luster. Its twinkling metallic elements creating the visage of the cosmos on your wrist, on your cuff. Uncompromised. You could see golden hands, golden indices. Even the mono counters feature a matte finish to the Aventurine. There's an Aventurine disc for the moon face with a laser ablated gold disc for the moon itself. And of course, the entirety of the case, which I will mention, is 17.4 millimeters thick. But the entirety of the case in blue ceramic, and look at how Omega finishes it. They're able to render both satin finish and polish with diamond-tipped finishing tools, all of it with the handsome vertical clutch, column wheel, twin mainspring barrel, amagnetic, caliber 9904. This is as good as it gets, a true chronometer, and one might argue a rare Omega that qualifies as a work of handmade art. This is the Blue Side Aventurine. I can't top that. Guys, go outside, have some fun, enjoy your Sunday, relax the rest of your weekend, and remember to check out thewatchbox.com where all of these watches are available right now. Thanks to you, thanks to my crew, Time Out, Tim Out, and thank you for logging on.